All right, let's take a look at a couple things that I think are real important though. The first thing is understanding personal power. I labeled this meetup group NLP for creating personal power. Well, that brings about really the first question, in addition to what is NLP, and that is, what is personal power? I think personal power is about having the capacity and the ability to create from within. As a therapist, I see a lot of people who come to me because I'm a therapist and they want me to fix something for them, or they want me to solve something for them. If you're an attorney, people come to you because they want you to solve something for them. If you're a mechanic, people come to you because they want you to solve something for them. If you're a financial consultant, they want you to do it for them. And I'm a firm believer in hiring experts. But I think the difference between the average person and the excellent person, the person who excels at things, is they've been able to generate within themselves the ability to do things that other people don't seem to have. Some people don't seem to have the ability to generate wealth from within. Some people don't seem to have the ability to generate happiness from within. Some people don't have the ability to generate calmness from within. I meet clients with pain management difficulties who don't have the ability to generate comfort from within. And one of the presuppositions of neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP, is that we have all of the resources within us that we need to solve any problem. The challenge for you, the challenge for me, the challenge for anybody is to be able to tap into these resources and know how to use them. Tony Robbins always said it's knowing when to do the right thing at the right time. Sometimes life is a matter of timing. NLP is a tool that can help us to gain personal power because it can do the first thing that's on this list here. It can help us to meet our deepest needs from within ourselves. I've often said that the most reliable person in our life is ourselves. Other people will in fact fail you and let you down. By the way, that doesn't mean they're bad people. It just means they have their human limitations. As a therapist, people often came to me over the years and they wanted me to work with their family and they wanted me to help them build a happy, healthy marriage because they didn't want to be let down again. And I told everybody who I worked with in couples counseling that no matter how hard we work in therapy, you will be let down again. Because the nature of people is that they are imperfect. And so the most reliable person in your world is actually you. You're the one who actually loves you most. And so I'm interested in being able to generate from within myself those things that I need most of all in order for me to experience success. And so I think the first aspect of personal power is to be able to generate from within everything that I need. Personal power is also about the ability to create healthy interactions with other people. People are social by nature. We like other people. One of the reasons why meetups are successful is we get to get out of our world, which often is in isolation, doing the tasks that produce the check that we need in order to pay our bills at the end of the month for the people who we love that we don't get to see because they're out doing the exact same thing. And meetup is a great way to build a sense of community, to find people who have common interests, people who we can become friends with and share with. It's really pretty interesting watching people come in the room. Preeti came in the room and it was her very first meetup, and she came in and I kind of figured it was her first meetup because she didn't know anybody yet. And I introduced her to a couple people and they spent time talking to her, and when she comes back next month for another meetup group, she's going to have friends here. That's fantastic. Because we can do things with other people that we could never do alone. Certainly it is true that we're the most reliable person in our world, and certainly it is true that other people will let us down, but at the same time, people can be a tremendous support during difficult times. For example, let's just say that when we got done with this meeting, my car was out of gas. And so could I push it down Oak Street, up here to the main drag, and push it down to the gas station, which is about a half a mile up over here? Would I be able to do that? No. It would be impossible. I'm not that strong, nor can I steer and push at the exact same time. But if I came back in the room and said, hey guys, I'm out of gas, could you help me push my car to the gas station? As a group, could we get my car to the gas station a half mile away? Yeah, you might not come to another meetup group here, but we could do it. We can do things with others that we cannot do alone, and personal power is all about building relationships that help us create a network of people who can help me accomplish what's most important. And the third aspect of personal power is the ability to utilize that creative part of the mind to solve any problem and to encourage growth. I meet people all the time who are stifled in their creativity. They feel like they're stuck. They're extremely frustrated because they know that inside of them is a creative capacity, but they haven't been able to tap into that. And so they just don't know what they want or what they're doing or where they're going. And they stay stuck. And they plan for big things next year. And we know that tomorrow never comes, and so next year never comes either. People who have personal power are people who have the ability to be successful at using the creative part of the mind. These things are important because neuro-linguistic programming is really one of the key techniques to help you, me, or anyone else do this. Now, I became interested in neuro-linguistic programming real simply because I wanted to find some ways for me to be a more effective person. As a therapist, I was exposed to some of Richard Bandler and John Grinder's work in neuro-linguistic programming during the course of psychotherapy school. Not a lot, but I sort of knew who they were. I kind of knew who Milton Erickson, the hypnotist, was. That was cool. I enjoyed those experiences. But I started doing therapy as a profession, trying to apply the techniques of psychotherapy to my own life, and found that I was as miserable as my clients. And so I started looking outside of therapy to find solutions. I thought, who else is a problem solver other than Aaron Beck, or who else is a problem solver other than Mitchenbach, or who else is a problem solver other than other psychotherapists? And I thought to myself, well, business people are, and so I didn't really know very much about business, but I decided I was going to venture over to the business section of the bookstore and see what kind of books they had. And when I did that, I found all kinds of books, and that was where I discovered Tony Robbins' books. Just like a lot of other people, Awaken the Giant Within. And I was amazed that his problem-solving strategies were as effective, or if not more effective, than the psychotherapeutic strategies that I had learned in working with clients. So I began to try to figure out what it was that Tony Robbins learned. Where did this come up from? Who was it? And of course, I found out that many of his ideas came from John Grinder and Richard Bandler, the founders of NLP, who he had studied with in the 1970s. And so I thought to myself, what is this NLP you speak of? And I discovered something. It was about using problem-solving strategies that were modeled after successful psychotherapists. What's interesting, though, is the psychotherapy community really seemed to reject NLP. They were looking for something more measurable, more empirical, something that could be written about in a journal, something that always worked the same way with everybody always. And Richard Bandler actually called neuro-linguistic programming the scientific study of subjectivity, which, by the way, doesn't sound a whole lot like anything that's going to be written up in a psychology journal at the university. And probably the most famous proponent of NLP was, of course, Tony Robbins, who began to teach the techniques of NLP in his early classes and seminars, and still does to this day. He's gone on to call it something different. He's picked the word neuroassociative conditioning to describe his form of NLP. The reason why is he doesn't want people to think that he has the capacity to program them. Tony Robbins says, I want people to know that I can help them condition themselves. But the techniques came from the same pool of resources where Bandler and Grinder modeled successful therapists to find out who was successful and why were they successful. And Tony Robbins, of course, went on to be probably one of the most successful entrepreneurs, business consultants, life coaches, on the entire planet. And so I became interested in it to solve some of my own problems in life. And I found when I applied the techniques of neuro-linguistic programming, the techniques that Tony offers in neuroassociative conditioning, and I apply those with the clients on my caseload, they get better faster. And when I apply them in my own life, I feel fine. I I feel great. I feel terrific. I feel happy. And guess what? I have the power. I've found that when I do what I ask my clients to do, it makes me successful. It gives me the ability to pass those traits along to them. Now, as a therapist, and I still am a therapist who sees clients for therapy in my office, that's great. But I'm also a business person. I've had my hand in several businesses totally unrelated to psychotherapy. Every now and then people say, you know how to cook? Yes, I've actually had my hand in the business of 3 different restaurants. And, although my wife says I can't, I want one more. Because I love good food. And so I love the restaurant business. And so I've had my hand in a number of different businesses over the years, from publishing to food to some other things as well. And I found that when I applied these techniques, not only to my emotional life, but to my financial life, to my spiritual life, to my relationship life, I experienced success. I'm not a person who is naturally happy. I don't think I'm a person who always wakes up every day and says, good morning world. Instead I wake up and say, oh God, it's morning. And so that happiness has, for me, been something I have really strived for. By the way, Imokawa is correct. When I apply these principles in each and every way, each and every day, I do seem to get better and better and better. And so in the time that we have tonight, I want to pass along to you some core concepts. Some of you are experienced with NLP, great. Some of you have never experienced NLP, great. I'm actually going to guide you through some processes. I'm not just going to talk, kind of like Charles having you shout out the chant here. I'm actually going to have you, I'm not going to have you shout out, don't worry. And I'm not going to have you role play either, by the way. You get to be yourself the entire night. But I'm going to guide you through some processes that have been helpful to me, that are helpful to other people as well. Now, that's what personal power is. What is NLP? NLP stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming. And NLP is really the foundation of Tony Robbins' ideas. Tony Robbins was one of the earliest students of Neuro-Linguistic Programming, and without a doubt, the most successful student in Neuro-Linguistic Programming. It is a toolbox, borrowing a quote from Tony Robbins here, to unleash the giant within. Tony Robbins is a giant. You've seen him, right? The book wasn't about unleash Tony Robbins within you. The book was about there's actually a giant you inside of you. Even if you're tiny. There's a giant you inside of you. And NLP is a tool set that can help you release that energy, release that spirit, and release the creativity necessary to be successful. It's also a method for really building relationships, because it gives you the capacity to go beyond yourselves and to impact other people. I love working with people and helping people who then go on to impact other people. That's really pretty cool. And neuro-linguistic programming is also the study of many different aspects of personal empowerment. There are a lot of people who want to put NLP in a box and say, well, this is what NLP is because that's what John Grinder taught. This is what NLP is because that's what Richard Bandler taught. This is what NLP is because this is what Robert Dilts taught. This is what NLP is. And NLP is really, has really evolved into many different modalities of empowerment, which can include rapport building, effective communication, problem solving, spiritual clarity, and emotional maturity. And all of those aspects of NLP are things that we can actually experience tonight in the time that we have. It's also a skill set that can be applied really to any framework in life, from counseling to business, from coaching to personnel management, to financial development, family relationships. The opportunities to use neuro-linguistic programming, the skill sets provided by NLP, really cross just about every endeavor of human functioning. There's a word that isn't used very often, but the word is praxeological. You know how psychology deals with the mind, and theology deals with the soul, and physics deals with the natural world. Praxeology. A praxeologist is one who actually looks at all of these things in their sum total to see how they relate to each other. And NLP really is, in my opinion, the most praxeological of all the sciences of of social sciences, if you will, in that it encompasses every aspect of life. Many of you are familiar with Tony Robbins' 6 Human Needs. I gave you a handout that has Tony Robbins' 6 Human Needs. And when Tony Robbins is doing a seminar, if you go to one of his seminars, you're going to hear him probably talk about the 6 Human Needs. As a matter of fact, I know that Charles here in this group has spent several sessions talking about what Tony Robbins identifies as 6 human needs. Now, there are a lot of writers out there who have been trying to figure out what are our most basic human needs. And I really like what Tony Robbins says. In order for us to function at our best in our relationships, in order for us to function at our best in our finances, in order for us to function at our best physically, in order for us to function at our best in any area of life, we need to have our needs met. And many people go through life without really identifying what their most important needs are. I mean, we know we need food, shelter, clothing, right? But if I could get Charles to let you stay in here and eat lemon cakes and drink water and have a warm blanket, would you be happy? Would you be happy living in this garage with lemon cakes and water and a blanket?
Throw in some chocolate.
For a night or two, throw in some chocolate in. Throw a bottle of wine and some chocolate. And that happiness might last for a couple of days. But we have needs beyond food, shelter, clothing. We have psychological needs. We have spiritual needs. We have relationship needs. And Tony Robbins spent some time figuring out what are almost universally 6 needs that people have. And so I've listed them out here on a little handout for you. And the first is certainty / comfort. Comfort comes from certainty. Certainty that the car you're driving is going to start every day. That's a big one, by the way. That's one way to be comfortable. My son lives in Wichita, Kansas, and he's 20, and he was driving a 2000 Mitsubishi Galant 5-speed, no air conditioner with 200,000 miles on it. And a friend of mine was selling a really decent, good-looking Volvo, same year, 140,000 miles, and pretty cheap. So I thought it was a much better car. It had an air conditioner, and it ran and drive pretty nice, and seemed a lot better than the crappy Mitsubishi. And so I bought it for my friend, and I called Ricky excited, and I said, hey, I'm going to drive this up to Kansas tonight. I'm going to swap cars with you, and you're going to love this Volvo because, hey, it's got an air conditioner, and it's got a stereo, and it runs and drives great. And he said, awesome, thanks, Dad. And so I drove all the way up to Wichita, no problem, fantastic, absolutely great. Dropped off the car, took his Mitsubishi Galant 5-speed, no air conditioning, no radio, and drove it all the way back to Tulsa. The things we're willing to do for our children. Because that was one miserable ride home. So any of you ever spent 3 hours in a no air conditioning 5-speed Mitsubishi Galant with no radio? Don't do it, if anybody else. I drove home and I was really excited, and later on that night I got a text message. I can't tell you word for word what the text message said, but it was my son basically saying, and I'm paraphrasing here, I hate this car. And so I called him back, what's wrong? And he said, the damn thing won't start. I left work and the damn thing wouldn't start. I went to go get my time card, it wouldn't start. I said, well, did he get home? And he said, yeah, somebody had to jump start me. I said, oh, well then it started, that's great, probably need a new battery. And so he said, yeah, well, I'll find out. And so I said, look, I'll put $100 in your account, because I felt bad that I gave him a car that didn't run, and you can go get a battery tomorrow. And so he did, and he drove home from the parts store after getting a battery, and he drove to work, and he came out of work, and the car didn't start.
Oh, no.
And he said, can you just bring the Mitsubishi back? Because even though the Mitsubishi had no air conditioning and it had no radio, and it was a 5-speed, it started every day. What that means is he could have predictability in his routine. He knew he was going to get to work. He knew he was going to get home from work. He knew all these things were in order. And that leads to a sense of comfort. So comfort isn't always air conditioning and good music. Sometimes comfort is simply predictability. We are creatures of both habit and ritual. They provide stability, a sense of order, and this really provides a baseline for people to measure both their comfort and well-being. The second need that we have or you can rephrase it, the second need that you have, is variety. Variety really is the spice of life. We like to have predictability and certainty because it provides comfort, but at the same time, if you ate the same thing every single day, what would happen to you at the end of the week? You'd go crazy. Do you ever have a friend who wants to eat at the same restaurant always? Even though there's a menu, you get irritated because it's always the same restaurant or the same food. We want variety in life. It expands our awareness of other people. It enhances every aspect of life. It gives us new experiences, teaches us to expand our depth in lives, and provides us with adventure and challenge. And those things help us to continue to grow. All these needs are related to one another. The third need that Robbins talks about is significance. Having a sense that life matters is the heart of significance. Significance comes from a sense of belonging and a sense of purpose. And healthy significance comes from really being a part of something. Being a part of a group, being a part of a community, being a part of a family. And people who are not a part of anything are not getting their deepest needs met. Think about your own life. Do you feel isolated right now? If you feel isolated, if you're not, are you too busy to be a part of anything? If you're too busy to be a part of anything, that need for significance is probably not being met. The next need that Tony Robbins talks about is connection and love. One of my favorite writers in psychotherapy is a guy named William Glasser, and he wrote in the 1960s in a book called Reality Therapy that our greatest need, food, shelter, clothing, whatever, our greatest need is actually the ability to love other people and the ability to feel love in return. There are a lot of people who don't accept love, or don't know what to do with love, or don't know what love looks like, mistaking love for something love is not. Our deepest need is the ability to love other people and to receive love in return. Later on, William Glasser wrote, you know, when I wrote about love and reality therapy, I was right, but really what that is a sense of belonging. Our deepest need is really a sense of belonging, and that comes from having the capacity to love. One of my favorite meditations, and I love to practice meditation, is the loving kindness meditation. Some of you who are meditators are familiar with that loving kindness meditation, where we take some time to focus on how we can pass our love to others and be open to receive love from other people. It's one of our deepest needs. It provides a sense of connection and love. Well, love is important. By the way, love is more effective than psychotropic medication. Sometimes people say, how do you know that? It's because I saw that one movie with my brain fried. That one movie. I saw that one movie. Did any of you see it? One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Jack Nicholson. And what was her name?
Louise Roger.
No.
Ratchet.
No. The Jack Nicholson movie where he was obsessive and he was crazy. As Good as It Gets, right. And what was the lady's name? Yeah, it was Helen Hunt. Thank you very much. It was my movie trivia. But during the movie, you know, he was crazy as could be. And he was falling for Helen Hunt, who thought he was crazy as could be. And the whole time he was not taking his medicine, but he was hanging out with her. And the very, spoiler alert, the very end of the movie, she had now finally fallen in love with him. And at the end of the movie, standing in front of the donut shop at 4 in the morning, she said, and are you taking your medicine? And he said, yes, which was a big lie. She was the medicine. Love can go a long way at making us well. Growth. We have a need to grow spiritually. We have a need to grow physically, a need to grow mentally, a need to grow in our relationships and in every aspect of life. The 12-step programs, by the way, they teach that it's important not to strive for progress, because if we strive for progress, our needs are never met, but rather to strive for perfection. We're always going to be frustrated. When we strive for progress, we can see that growth is the path that we're on. And when we're on a path of growth, we feel a sense of fulfillment and satisfaction. The chief idea here is that we can expand our knowledge, our skills, our experience. And research shows that an active mind One that keeps learning reduces the risk of Alzheimer's disease and other disorders of the mind. A couple of years ago, I took it upon myself as an adult to learn a second language. And I felt smarter during that period than I had at any other period of my life since I was 4. Because when I was 4, I thought I knew everything. But as an adult, I felt kind of stupid. I felt sort of slow mentally. And learning a foreign language required me to use a part of my mind that I hadn't used in my adult world. And I felt incredibly smart for a few years. Now that I know that language, I feel dumb again. So now, kind of like Charles, I'm looking for a crash course in Spanish also, because I don't know Spanish, and I figured that would be the next most useful language to learn. I don't know Spanish.
No. Michel Tomas. You ever heard of him?
Oh, no.
He uses neurolinguistic programming when teaching Spanish.
Oh, okay.
He teaches
Sure.
it as if you were just learning the language for the
Right.
first time.
Yeah, and I actually have heard of that now. Teaching language with NLP, which is a great idea. This is an awesome way to experience accelerated learning patterns. The sixth thing is contribution. We need to feel like what we're doing is contributing, that we're productive. That can be to a greater good, to a family, to a cause, to material production, to ideas. My grandfather was an inventor. He invented many products that you use today. He was a remarkable guy. He lived to be 98. He just died a few years ago. And you use his products every single day. He was a brewmaster. He was president of the American Brewmasters Association, and he owned some breweries. And in the 1940s, he figured out how to take malt liquor, which tastes horrible. Have you guys ever drank malt liquor? And make it fruity and delicious. So next time you kick back and have a Seagram's wine cooler, you can thank Bubba. Being a brewmaster in the 1960s, he figured out how to make yeast rise quickly. And so next time you have a Pillsbury Poppin' Fresh dough, realize that it was a brewmaster who figured out chemically how to make the yeast rise quickly for your Poppin' Fresh dough biscuits. He was also the president of Fleischmann Foods. And as the president of Fleischmann Foods, he came up with a great way to make a buttery, whippy spread that almost tasted exactly like butter. So if you're dying from inhaling too many chemicals with your meal filled with artificial color, food, and chemicals, you can thank my grandfather for all the margarine you're consuming rather than actual butter, which is real food that actually came from an actual animal, rather than the laboratory. Not all inventions are always universally good in the long run. In the 1980s, he figured out, with my other grandfather, who was a financier, how to take corn and Texaco, 1974 Iran oil embargo, and make gasohol. In the 1980s, he figured out how to pasteurize bottles in a brewery without pasteurization, which, by the way, is another way of saying we killed everything that was good for you, and using ozonation instead. And so he started a company in the 80s called Ozone Incorporated. And next time you swim in a swimming pool or a hot tub that's ozonated rather than chlorinated, you can thank Bubba, that's my grandfather. And when he died at 98, just a few years ago, he was working on a foot fungus medicine that he had invented to cure his own foot fungus. He spent his whole life creating things and inventing things that all of us benefit from, and except the margarine thing. And he lived to be 98 because he was still creating. By the way, he was healthy for 98 years. He didn't die unhealthy. He died at the end at 98 because his body, the parts just wear out. In fact, his doctor, liked him a lot, said, you know, if I could do surgery on a 98-year-old guy and give you a new heart, you could go till you're 298. Because the doctor knows that productivity brings life. And so the question for us is, in what way can I be productive? By the way, I inherited none of my grandfather's science or math genes, not one of them. And so I can't be productive by inventing cool stuff, but how can I be productive? That's a question I ask myself, because I know that by giving to other people, I know that by being productive, I know that by doing things that are important for the community and my friends and the family and the people around me, that I too, like my grandfather, I'm going to make it to 98. These are our needs. So here's the question. If you're not living the life you want, How can you start living the life you want to live? Many of you in here are content with life. Some of you are happy with life. Some of you think life is the greatest thing you've ever seen. And some of you aren't quite sure yet if you're thrilled about the whole idea. And there are a couple of people in here right now who know that they're just not satisfied in life and don't really like it very much at all. Anytime I have a room with 20 or 30 people, I'm going to have a little bit of both in the room, and somewhere in the middle, most people are probably going to fall. If you're sitting here tonight and you're thinking to yourself, how can I have the life that I want to live? Look at these needs and ask yourself this question: which ones are not being met? Or how can I more effectively meet my needs? Now, the pie graph here is really pretty simple. Notice all slices of pie are the same size here. What that represents is the healthy person who's meeting all of these needs in each area of life. But here's what happens with people. Here's why people become dissatisfied with life. They get really good at meeting the needs in one area. See that big fat green one there? But they neglect to meet their needs in another area. And guess what? That pie, screwed up. It's not a healthy piece of pie. If this was a wheel, we couldn't really roll this one down the wheel because it would be lopsided. And so the question for all of us is, and that's why I like this little handout. I like this handout not because every class needs a handout. I like the little handout because I can look at it and try to figure out, wow, where are my needs not being met? And then ask the next question, how can I begin to meet those needs? Well, NLP gives us some tools for meeting our deepest needs. And there's a pattern on page 2 of the notes that I passed out that is actually a little mini program you can run to help you meet your deepest needs. And the first thing to do is to identify any unfulfilled or neglected needs. And then take a trip in your mind to an experience or time in life when those needs were being fulfilled. I'm a firm believer, instead of telling my clients how to do something, I'm going to ask them how to continue to do what they used to do correctly. It's a lot easier to teach let a dog draw from their old tricks than to try to teach them new tricks. And then to identify the behaviors, emotions, relationships, or spiritual actions that they were engaged in at the time. And then move it to the present, asking themselves, what was I doing then that I could be doing now? And make a decision to take one action then this week. And then to associate it in that new feeling by seeing yourself as you know you will be. And if we can future pace, if we can see ourselves as we know we can be, we will be that. And so, by intensifying that wonderful feeling and then moving from here into action, by the end of this week, any areas of life that you have not been meeting those needs are areas of life where you will be meeting those needs. Now, I can just teach this, so I can go through it and say, isn't that cool, isn't that cool, isn't that cool, isn't that cool, and you guys will probably think that's cool. The power of suggestion. But when you experience, you'll see that it really is true. And so I'm going to take a couple minutes before we talk about the next area, which is the importance of modeling, and I'm going to guide you through this process. So take in a breath and close your eyes. Sit in the chair. This will take probably 3 minutes, maybe even 2. Put the paper down, breathe in deeply, and continue to just breathe in and breathe out. As you continue to breathe in and breathe out, let yourself relax physically. You'll probably find it easier to visualize in a moment if your eyes are closed. So if your eyes aren't closed, go ahead and close the eyes. And every one of us has a creative part of the mind, and a part of the mind where awareness is created. Access that part of the mind right now and identify an area of need that is either being neglected by you or, despite your best efforts, is still unfulfilled. Is it variety? Is it comfort? Is it significance? Love? Is it growth? Is it contribution? Identify an area that is either unfulfilled or an area that has been neglected. Now think back to a time in life, maybe it was recently, maybe it was last spring or last summer or last year or even 2 or 3 years ago. Some of you might have to go back 5 or 6 or 10 years. But think back to a time when that need was being met, that need for comfort or that need for love or that need for connection or growth or contribution or variety. And now think, identify, think about the behaviors that you were doing at that time. What emotions you experienced at that time. What social relationships, what were you doing with others at that time? And spiritually, how were you caring for yourself at that time? Now ask yourself, looking back, what were you doing then that you could be doing now? Think of one thing, identify one thing from your previous experience where that need was being met that you were doing then that you could do now if you wanted to. And now decide on one new action to take this week. Make a decision right now. One thing you'll do this week to meet that need. And in NLP, we talk about associating into a feeling. And so associate into that by seeing yourself as you know that you will be today, tomorrow, next week, next year, if you take that action. See yourself loved or loving, contributing and productive, growing, significant, experience new things, variety, and experiencing comfort in life. And now intensify that feeling of seeing you the way you know you have the capacity to be. Like Charles said, on a level 10. And create that state now. And now, open your eyes. Take in a breath. Feel fantastic. In any NLP pattern, the last step is test it. How are you going to test it? Tomorrow, I want you to ask yourself this question. Did I do what I committed to doing? And how do I feel after doing it? Next Friday, ask yourself, did I do what I committed to doing? And how do I feel after doing that? And you're going to find that you're going to feel fantastic. Like your needs in areas of life that have been neglected in the past are actually being met. Now, the second concept of Tony Robbins that relates to NLP is that of modeling. Modeling and the importance of modeling is something that Tony Robbins often talks about. Finding an exemplar is something that NLP talks about. NLP really was the modeling of successful therapists. Richard Bandler, a psychotherapist / computer analyst, hooks up with John Grinder, the linguist from the University of California, and the two of them set out to figure out why some therapists are successful and others aren't. And so they first studied Fritz Perls because he was on campus and his office was a mess. And Richard Bandler was able to organize his files. And they studied, why is this guy more successful than other therapists? And they got done studying him and said, who should we study next? And Fritz Perls said, well, there's a therapist down at the Family Therapy Institute who's pretty successful. Her name is Virginia Satir. Why don't you go study her? So I went down there and studied Virginia Satir to find out how come she's a successful family therapist and other people aren't. And then they said to Virginia Satir, who else can we study? And she said, well, there's a guy who does hypnosis in Arizona, a psychiatrist named Milton Erickson. Study him. He gets remarkable results. And so they modeled him. And what neuro-linguistic programming in the early 70s was really a collection of, if you will, the methods of success that these folks who were highly successful at what they did do. And so the entire concept of neuro-linguistic programming came about because of modeling. And the question is, well, who did Tony Robbins model? Interesting. Let's talk about the relationship between firewalking, neuro-linguistic programming, and Tony Robbins. As an early student of Tony Robbins, or as an early student of John Grinder and Richard Bandler, Tony Robbins did everything and learned everything he possibly could from him. And his mentor was really John Grinder. And he went to John Grinder and said, but what's next? What else is there? And John Grinder almost flippantly, jokingly said, learn how to firewalk. And so Tony Robbins, wanting to follow the example of somebody who had what he wanted, said, okay, and found fire walking. And we know that the rest is kind of history. It's interesting to me, by the way, that Tony Robbins became one of the most successful NLP practitioners, probably the most successful NLP practitioner. And the one he modeled was John Grinder. There's two of them, John Grinder and Richard Bandler. One of them dives every day, is active every day, and in his 60s looks like he's in his 30s. One of those two, Bandler and Grinder, has in almost every area of life implemented the ideas and the strategies that are suggested by NLP. Tony Robbins modeled John Grinder. Richard Bandler is the more famous one. John Grinder is, in my opinion, the most successful one. He has the kind of life that I want. Good relationships, financial security. He's contributed to society. He's physically healthy. When I'm in my 60s, I hope that I'm in as good a shape as John Grinder is. And that's who Tony Robbins modeled. He also modeled Jim Rohn, who was an extremely highly successful writer, business executive. Really, I think Tony Robbins probably could have gone on the therapy side, but went the business side because of his mentorship and his learning and the modeling he did with Jim Rohn. So the question is, for you and I, who is it that we can model? Who is it that we can model? The idea of neuro-linguistic programming is all of us have the same bodies or the same neurology. We have different bodies, different shape, different physical strengths, attributes, etc. But if you look at the core of our structure, no matter what race, height, geographic region, religion, age, etc., something like 99.99% of all human DNA is the same. It's really pretty interesting. In other words, we all have the same neurology, which means we all have the capacities to succeed. So if Charles is successful, or Howie's successful, and you're not successful, it's not because they have something that you don't have. It's that they've learned something that you don't know. And so the question for you, and the question for me is, how can I model successful people? That's one of the most important concepts in neuro-linguistic programming. There's nothing that others can do that you don't have the capacity to do. And even when we see somebody do something miraculous that nobody else will be ever able to do, somebody else always comes along and does the exact same thing. Because nobody could ever hit as many home runs as Babe Ruth, right? It would be impossible. He was a superhuman. No one else could accomplish what he accomplished. Hank Aaron. Of course, they can all accomplish it now. Modeling is a pathway to excellence. AA is entirely built on the concept of modeling. The 12-step programs, millions of people have been successful because of their participation in the 12-step program. It's not that the 12-step programs have something other things don't. It's that they've really grasped on the concept of modeling. When you're new to a 12-step program, you're supposed to find a sponsor. Who should that be? Somebody who has what you want. So you can learn from that person how you can be successful. So here's the question for you. Who is it that you want to model? Think about it. Is there a person in your world, in your life, that you would like to be like? Do you look at somebody and say, that's who I wish I could become? Is there anybody? If there isn't, your world is too small, and you need to find a new model. Because if you model yourself, it's kind of like there's an old Zen axiom that if you try to fix the mind with your mind, it leads to nothing but confusion. And so if we try to fix ourselves with only ourselves, well, we'll be limited by our own experiences. So here's the question. Who's in your world that can be a model to you? Who do you want to model? Maybe it's a famous person who's on TV or writes books or whatever else, but I always encourage people to find models from their real world. I've been pretty successful in business. A lot of people wish that they had the same business success that I've had. Charles may or may not be aware of this, but I learn as much from him as he ever learns from coming to any of my classes, because I'm watching him, because my perception is that his business is more successful than mine, and I want to see how he's doing it. Howie's another guy. Howie's another guy who I want to be like. And so I meet with Howie, I eat with Howie, I go to Howie's house, I sit on the computer with Howie, I email Howie, I call Howie, and the whole time I'm trying to learn how I can be like Howie. Makes a lot of sense.
Can you model from various?
Oh yeah, absolutely, you don't have to pick one, but we need to find a starting point. I had a client in my office yesterday. Here's what I told him. He's successful, he's a millionaire. He owns an internet company. He's done real well. He's 36. He's a skater. He dresses like it. He doesn't fit into the business world. He's got a very successful business, so probably one of the most successful businesses in Tulsa. And when he looks back at his friends, who are still all his high school buddies, none of them have exceeded anything beyond minimal Oklahoma expectations. And so I realized that he's got no one to model. So I asked him, I said, who do you want to be like? And he told me someone who's on TV. And because there isn't anyone in his world who has what he wants. And I said to him, that's great. It's great that you're able to identify somebody who has the characteristics and attributes that you think would be beneficial to you. Here's the question though, who's in your real world that you can actually pick up the phone and talk to? Nobody. I gave him the firewalking brochure. I said, here you go, the Firewalking Institute of Research and Education in Dallas, Texas. They're not like you. They're beyond you. I said, there's a guy there, his name is Charles Horton, he's a successful business person just like you, but his business is worth twice as much, and he experienced his business success twice as fast as you did. Really? There's somebody out there like me? I thought I was a superstar. The universe is big. Come walk on fire. And he looked at that brochure, he just held in his hand, he had a big smile on his face, and he said, that would up my coolness quotient a lot. And my answer to him was, absolutely. But it's not going to up his coolness quotient a lot because walking on fire is cool. It's going to up his coolness quotient because he's going to meet people outside of his limited sphere of people who he can begin to model so that he can experience success, not just financially in business, but in his relationships, in his relationship with his 4-year-old son, and with his community. You know, one of the things we can model from Charles, I'm picking on you tonight, Charles, is the contributions to the community that his business makes. Sometimes the community's not grateful for it, but nonetheless the contribution is made, and it's made by those employees who are giving back to the communities. And that's something to model. So here's the question, if you decide there's a model, a person to model, what's a technique that can help you to attract the characteristics of that person? And so think for a minute who it is that you would like to model. Somebody in your world, or even somebody who's nationally known who's not in your world. For the sake of this exercise, I want everybody to be able to think of at least one person in your world who you'd like to model. Do you have a person in your mind? Do you have a person? Raise your hand if you have a person in mind you can think of that you'd like to model. I mean, maybe it's maybe it's my grandfather. He was my first model. You know, that's who I wanted to be like. So it can be a family person. It can be a business person. It can be a person who you see as having successful relationships. Is there somebody in your world who has what you want? Think about that person. And this is a great exercise, a great mental exercise using the submodalities and the creative capacity of the mind that neurolinguistic programming talks about to experience, if you will, sort of collecting the attributes of that person and bringing them into your own life. So I'll guide you through that exercise. It's really a pretty simple exercise. Close your eyes. A lot of these things are easier done with the eyes closed. And identify a person who has what you want. Now imagine that person as a giant photo in front of you. Imagine that on the giant photo, all the attributes are labeled, perhaps even with a Sharpie marker off to the left, off to the right. The attributes that you see, punctual, stick-to-itive, loving, caring, generous, grateful, successful, wealthy, calm, spiritual. Whatever attributes you associate with that person, see those attributes written in a giant Sharpie on the left side and the right side and above that person. And imagine looking at that picture, seeing all those attributes that you see as important labeled. Now imagine that photo is life-size and it's being held up by a group of cheerleaders. Just imagine it. It's a crazy imagination, but imagine that photo of the person whose attributes you'd like to experience in your own life is being held up by a group of cheerleaders on a piece of paper. In fact, you can even hear the crowd. You can hear them cheering. It's as if you're at a football game. And imagine that you're 20 feet back and you realize that when you lock onto that image, that everybody in the crowd is supporting you in breaking through that image and attracting all of those labels to your own life. So are you ready? Imagine now running directly towards that paper picture. See yourself busting through it, emerging onto the other side, having attracted those words, taking them with you, as if they were Velcro to you, running out the other side, feeling those words and attributes and having associated it into your life. Here's the test. There's an NLP related test thing. Continue with your eyes closed for a minute and think about one of those words. Think about one of those words you've attracted to yourself from that model and let yourself feel it. Feel it at an increasing level of intensity. Feel that word now at a higher, more important level of consciousness and awareness. Taking a breath, pay attention to the floor below you, open the eyes. Feeling fantastic, by the way. Next technique, talk about a couple other techniques, then we'll run out of time. The importance of ritual. Ritual really is really important. Tony Robbins, actually, there's a quote from Tony Robbins, our life comes from ritual. Rituals produce comfort, which, according to Tony Robbins, is the first of the 6 basic human needs. Let's talk about ritual. What rituals do you have in your life? The ritual of brushing your teeth. The ritual of waking up via alarm clock and hitting the snooze button. The ritual of reading a child a bedtime story every night. The ritual of trimming your nose hairs before an important meeting. What rituals do you have in your life? The ritual of saying a prayer before you go to sleep, or when you're on the runway. There's a lot of people forget that ritual of prayer until they got on the runway and they're about to take off. And then suddenly they remember, oh yeah, that ritual of prayer, I forgot about that one. Life is filled with rituals. Rituals produce a sense of security. Rituals produce significance. Rituals lets us know that things are in fact normal. We have financial rituals. By the way, sometimes we develop rituals that are unhealthy. Do any of you have unhealthy financial rituals? Like getting the mail and putting it in a pile? Rather than opening the mail and putting it in the 3-ring binder? I'm just going to take a wild stab in the dark here. When you get financial statements that are your own personal financial statements, Charles, do you put them in the envelope behind the coffee cup next to the phone in the kitchen, or do you take them into your office, open them up, and put them in some sort of file or system?
You'll see stacks of 3-ring binders in my office of all of our things.
So that's your ritual. That's a healthy ritual. But a lot of people have an unhealthy financial ritual, which is take the bill and drop it behind the couch. And then once a month I can move the couch and get all the bills because I know exactly where they're supposed to be. Relationship rituals. You guys have relationship rituals? It's amazing. It's amazing whenever you work with people with successive marriages to see that they manifest the exact same patterns. Those really aren't patterns, those are actually rituals. It's how they dance in front of their partner. Body rituals. I don't know, I can look in the room here and tell you who goes to the gym and who doesn't go to the gym. Habits and patterns, subconscious and conscious. What are your rituals? Here's the thing, Tony Robbins teaches this, change a little and you can change a lot. Tony Robbins actually taught this on some video I watched not too long ago. The difference between hot, average, and butt ugly. 1 millimeter. Apparently Tony Robbins was a friend of a plastic surgeon and told him that we often associate beauty, a perfect 10, with the width of a person's philtrum, the space between their nose and their upper lip, and the congruence to their eye. So if it matches here, they're hot. And so people come in for plastic surgery to get their eyes lifted and changed, and their nose lifted and changed, and ideally they're trying to get that balance that we perceive as physical beauty. And this is Tony Robbins' story. If you're 1 millimeter off, well, then you're average. And if you're 2 millimeters off, you're butt ugly. And the surgeon can come in and change 2 millimeters or 1 millimeter and change that dynamic. And my observation was, take Greta Van Susteren as an example. A remarkable transformation with just a couple of millimeters. The little things in life can change a lot. And so here's the question, what ritual can you add to your life that will change your life a lot? Is it prayer? Is it diet? Is it reading? Is it story time with a kid? Is it alone time with yourself? You know what my biggest challenge in life is taking time by myself alone. My house is like Grand Central Station. And I love it. I like having people in my world. But I'm the opposite of the person who needs to spend time with others. I need to spend time alone. It's one of the reasons why I like coming to Dallas every couple of weeks. At least I get an evening or an afternoon alone. Because usually I don't get that too much. The importance of rituals. Adding a little bit can change a lot. I work with a lot of people for the treatment of obesity, and here's what I do. I don't tell them to stop eating donuts and Twinkies and lemon cakes. If you haven't had the lemon cakes, they rock. What I tell people is not stop eating stuff that's bad for you, instead start eating stuff that is good for you. And pretty soon, you will stop eating the stuff that's bad for you because your body will start to crave the stuff that is good for you. And so the ritual I teach my weight loss clients for the very first week is this. Each and every day, you'll cut up half a pound of fruit and a half a pound of vegetables, and you'll add that to your diet every day. I teach people to lose weight not by quitting something, but by adding something to their diet. And it works. It's highly effective. And that one ritual can change the dynamic of a person who struggled with obesity their entire life into a dynamic where they're finally able to manage something wonderful in life. And so, how do you establish a new ritual? Figure out what it is you need to do, keep on doing it. They say it takes 21 days to build a habit or to create a habit, and continue to do it for 21 days. Here's a great activity that I like, and I like doing these things. I teach them to people. I have a feeling when I teach them to people, 99 of the people leave the room and say, wow, that was awesome, and one actually does it. You know what's interesting though? The one who actually does it, their life changes 100%. If you need to change your focus, change what you're looking at. Here's the exercise I give people. If you don't like life the way it is, go grab a pile of magazines. If you don't have a pile of magazines, go to Barnes & Noble, buy a bunch of magazines. Buy some scissors, buy some glue stick, buy a poster board. If you have teenagers, you already have these things at home. And go to the kitchen table, just like this was 1978, and cut out the pictures that represent the things that you wish you had in life. Go through that magazine. If you see a fancy car and you wish you had a fancy car, put that on there. If you see an ad for natural seeds and there's a sun and you wish you had warmth and sunshine in your life, cut out that sunshine. If there's a picture for a Viagra ad and there's a guy and a girl holding hands walking down the beach and you wish you had some Viagra, that's a joke. You wish you had the happiness they have walking down the beach, cut that picture of them out and stick that to the marker board. In fact, when we do the life coaching class, we're actually going to have magazines, we're actually going to have glue sticks, we're actually going to have scissors, and we're actually going to have a bunch of people making collages one day. It'll take us probably 30 minutes to do it. The assignment I give to people then is take that collage that has the pictures of what you want in life and stick it on the bedroom door, right above the doorknob at eye level. And then realize that every time you walk out of the door in the morning, when you step over the threshold, every step you take the rest of the day is aiming for one of those pictures. And it's a great way to establish a new morning ritual of looking towards something instead of dreading another day. The next concept on here, Tony Robbins state change. How many of you have been to a Tony Robbins seminar? Your Tony Robbins talking about state change. Change your state. Change your state. Change your state. There are a lot of techniques for changing state. It's pretty hard to come here and leave here not feeling happy. I suppose the only way would be if you came here and they weren't serving lemon cakes. Those things are awesome. I suppose you would leave with a sense of dissatisfaction if they weren't serving those in the future, but it'd be pretty hard to leave here not feeling good because at the beginning of every session, Charles always takes time to have people do that shit, to help them feel great, to feel terrific, to feel happy. That's a ritual of this room. That's a ritual of the Firewalking Institute of Research and Education. It's a ritual that helps us create a focus, but it's also a method of changing the state. Even if you fake that you're laughing for 10 seconds and you belly laugh the hardest you possibly can, you'll find that somewhere between second number 5, 6, and 7, even if you were feeling miserable and faking it at 1, 2, and 3, it becomes a real laugh for 8, 9, and 10. And that happens each and every time because when we change our physiology, we change our emotional state. It goes back to that Zen saying, if you try to change mind with mind, there's nothing but confusion. If you want to change your mind, change your state. If you want to change your mind, change your body. Now, I'm a firm believer in physical exercise to do that. And I can tell a big difference between the days or the weeks when I exercise 3 times a week for 30 minutes or longer, or 75% of my heart rate, and the weeks when I don't do that. My state is negative versus my state being positive. I was watching an interview with Rahm Emanuel on TV today, the new mayor of Chicago. How many of you follow Illinois politics? It's usually about corruption and jail and things like that. But Rahm Emanuel is being interviewed about his lifestyle by Wolf Blitzer. It was really pretty interesting. He exercises 7 times a day. And when I was watching him, whether I agree politically or not politically with him is irrelevant, I was thinking to myself, this guy seems really happy. In fact, this guy seems way too happy to be the mayor of Chicago, which has real problems that he's not going to be able to solve, that he's actually going to get blamed for. And so, wow, why is he so happy? Why is he happy? Because he takes care of his body, that's why. He was real proud to say, I exercise 7 days a week. Here's exactly what my specific routine is. And he said, I take a multivitamin every day also. And I realized, well, this is a guy who takes care of himself. He realizes that to change the world, he's got to change himself. And that's going to begin with a ritual and a state change of physical wealth and wellness. This is why Tony Robbins has been successful. He didn't just say, think yourself well and happy. He said, act yourself well and happy. How do you do it? You do it by doing push-ups. You do it by getting up and yelling. You get up and do something. That's one of the most important things. Change your body, change your mind. Now, we're not going to exercise in here, don't worry. No, he's going to end this on a note where we have to exercise. Nobody has to exercise. but we are going to change our body to change our state. Breathing. Breathing is the only thing we've done from the beginning of life until the very end of life. I've never met anybody yet who stopped breathing. Everybody who I know is still around, continues to breathe. We do it each and every day, but people do this each and every day without ever thinking about breathing and breath work. And probably one of the easiest ways to change your state, if you're not going to get on the treadmill or go for a walk, is to take a minute and focus on your breathing. So I'm going to teach you a couple ways to change your breathing. And tomorrow, or the next day, or next week, if you find yourself unhappy, if you find yourself restless, irritable, and discontent, if you find yourself not living the life that you want to, take 1 minute. 1 minute. And do next week what I teach you right now. Sit in a chair. Taking a breath. Just breathe in. You can do it with the eyes open or with the eyes closed, but just breathe in. And learn the difference between a shallow breath and a deep breath. A shallow breath fills the top part of the lungs, a deep breath, the lowest part of the lungs. And we've been breathing our whole life without ever thinking about it, and now realize you can actually breathe and pay attention to the process. And so take in a deep breath, filling your lungs completely with air all the way down to the bottom, and exhale. Take in another deep breath, breathing in deeply, filling the air all the way to the bottom, and exhale. Now take in a short breath, only filling the top part of the lungs with air, and exhale. Another short breath, and exhale. And now change the duration of your breath. By that, I mean if you normally breathe quickly, breathe slowly. If you normally breathe slowly, breathe quickly. Take in a breath and count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Much longer than usual. Exhaling on a 6 count. Much longer than usual. Then you can even do creative things, like think to yourself, when I think of breath, what color do I think of? And close your eyes, taking a deep breath, imagining that you're drawing in that breath in a more vibrant color, or hue, or shape, or texture. And exhale. And well, it may seem like a silly thing to do. Open the eyes, by the way. It'll change your state every single time. Because when we make little changes, it leads to big changes. And when we change the body, it always changes the mind. I don't really have a lot of time to talk about anything else, but I am willing to answer and help. I'm probably going to run out of time here, but in the handout, there's another page that talks about Tony Robbins' areas of mastery. And these are things that we are going to be talking about in September in more depth. Emotional mastery, physical mastery, relationship mastery, and time mastery. Those are the areas that people tend to have the most difficulty in life with. And there are a lot of NLP techniques that can actually help a person to be successful in each of these areas of personal mastery. So if you're interested in the techniques that you can use in your own life, we hope to see you in September. If you're interested in these techniques so that you can help other people to experience mastery in those areas of life, we're going to be teaching those processes as well. If you have any deep thoughts, profound